welcome back to the podcast, man. Thank you guys for joining in. I love the feedback that I've been getting lately so far. It's been a good ride so far, and definitely like nerve-wracking. And today, I'm not gonna lie, my nerves is a lot. I thought I was a pro at this, but I have a special guest here with me. Go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of tell me who you are.
So my name is Brittany Farrow, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Yeah.
And then I'm also what's called a sex certified sex therapist.
Yeah. So you're in the. This is a heavy hitter,
so you're
man.
Nervous.
It's a heavy hitter. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, man, dude. My buddy at work hit me up. Her husband was like, "Yeah, you should get my wife on." I'm like, huh? But we're here. So kind of just, let's just get right into it. Let's just jump into it. What got you involved into not only being a therapist, but there's so many, I guess, revenues for being a therapist. Mm-hmm. What made you get into that specific role?
So I think, of course, as everything, it goes all the way back. I think just life history. I've always been fascinated about why people do what they do. Mm-hmm. Right. There's a lot of, originally I wanted to go into like substance use work. Right. Yeah. And so a lot of family that use drugs, a lot of mental health issues. And so it's always been interesting to me. Yeah. And then, to be completely honest, went to school for psychology, and there's really, it's a weird field, right? Like accounting, you can go right out with a bachelor's. For me, to take it to the level, then I decided I needed to go to grad school. Yeah. And so, also not to get too technical, but I went into marriage and family therapy because it's based off of systems, right? So it's what I tell everybody is, even if it was possible, I don't think it's possible to be perfect, but even if you were, there's so much that you're interacting with, right? Yeah. So whether that's your partner, your family, your coworkers, my husband,
as we're right here, right now,
and then even bigger than that, right? The city that you live in, your culture, the political systems, the world systems, and so naturally I went into that, and then now currently I've worked in an agency for a little while, and then now I'm in private practice. The sex therapy side of it, I'm going to be completely honest with you. So when I started grad school, I had 2 under 2, right? Yeah. So it was a lot. And, as part of the curriculum for working with couples, you have to take a sex therapy class. Yeah. And so I'd already been interested because of the professors that taught, right? And then we're sitting in there and they're talking about these topics and everybody else is just like, yeah. And I'm like, what? Yeah. There's just so much I didn't know. Right. So much I didn't know. And so
that's where I get confused at, because instantly when I hear of a sex therapist, I'm like, dang, do I got something wrong? But you don't realize, and I guess myself, how much that actually plays a factor into the world.
Huge.
So
huge
what motivated you to get into that specifically? Because obviously, and I want you to be as open as possible.
For sure.
So obviously, before I would say you found the love of your life, how was it? I would say with your sex life, was that something that you were like, okay, I want to study this. I want to, be a professional at this.
So I think for a lot of it was, and I hope it's getting better. But my sex education basically came from, I'm from rural New Mexico, little bit in Texas, right? Lived outside of Houston for a little while. It just was non-existent. Yeah. And so I think early on, whether it was intentional or not, the messages that I got, I didn't like it, right? And so I don't know if it's just who I am. I've always questioned things, but what I noticed, especially going into high school, is men are allowed to talk about it. Men are allowed to enjoy it. Men are allowed to have all of my opinions, right? No, and then it was and then it was for women, it was oh no, don't. Yeah. No. It was these conflicted messages of because then there's certain names that are applied, right? So I've always been curious about it and just thought it was odd, right? You get these messages about, you hear all the guys are doing it. Yeah. The numbers just weren't adding up. Technically, they're probably doing it with the girls thing. I know.
And that's not fair. And so you're touching on a good point because I brought it up before in one of my episodes. And men will get glorified for doing the same as what what a female does, but the female will get most hatred. I agree with that. I would say sleeping around. That's not the professional term, but what is your opinion on that? Because you kind of just mentioned it a little bit. What is your opinion on that? Because like, I'm gonna be honest, I'm 27.
Okay.
In my high school and college days, I was not the person I am today to where I was doing those things and I felt like the man. I felt like every time I walked in a room, I had an achievement unlocked.
Yeah.
You know, so what is your topic on that?
I think you're exactly right. I think things are changing, by the way. I work with the generations coming up, and I think it's getting so much better. But that is basically how I felt. There was a lot of, not even just, I mean, if we really want to get into it, if we really want to get into it,
let's go.
It wasn't even just about like, oh, sexuality is in what's happening between peers. It was these messages of like, hey, you know, your cheer shorts are too short. And if you're around certain people, and I'm like, well, who's looking at me? You know, these messages, I mean, again, technical term, right? I'm definitely a feminist, like,
you're fine.
feminist therapist, right? But I work a lot with men, so I'm sure we'll talk about that too, right? But I think that is the problem, is that men are allowed to be, because masculinity almost requires it, right? And then as women, and if we really get into it, anatomically, right? Women, as compared to men, are actually made to experience pleasure during sex, right? The clitoris specifically, right? Men don't have a single part on their body that is made for only sexuality.
That is
Women
true.
do.
That
Women
is
do.
true. Yeah.
And I think it just goes way back. I think it goes to, that's how a lot of us, our introduction into it is that for women, it has to be quiet. For men, it can be celebrated, right? Because
it's difficult. I feel bad for, well, not now, but during my high school, college days, I felt bad. Like once I started realizing, for me specifically, what that meant. For me, spirituality, like I'll say this, like I'm more Christian than anything. So every time I slept or laid down with a person, as my pastor would say, I was leaving that part, a piece of me with that person every time. And so I didn't realize that. So like overall, I figured like, why am I doing this? Like, why? And I like kind of like what you mentioned, females have more of a, I would say an end goal during that intimate relationship. And so I guess, what is your take on the aspect of, you mentioned you actually communicate or you have sessions with men.
Mostly men, actually. So I didn't answer your question before. Most of the sex therapy work that I do. So what's interesting is I like working with men. And what I tell everybody is, as odd as it sounds, right? Nobody talks about it. But my experience and my practice is men are more likely to come to therapy to talk about that as the first symptom than they will anything else, right? So if most of the clients, we talk about all of the different things, but what brings them in is, she want to have sex with me. We're roommates. We're roommates. If I had $1 for every time I heard roommates, right? Like, so
that's it.
And that, I work with a lot of different things, but what's so interesting to me is that's what will bring them in. And then we get to talk about the deeper things. We get to talk about what's happening within them and their relationships. And so, I think that's why, you know, and I think too, it could go back to that, right? Is if they're experiencing difficulty or stress in their sexual relationship, it is a big deal. And I think I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you like a man's experience.
Hey,
but I think where it comes to is because it's so tied into identity and it's so tied into what it is to be a man, where I want it to absolutely be a part of a woman's identity if that's who they are. But it, it causes a lot of
that's amazing because
things.
like, during this whole process, your husband kept asking me, he was like, what are you going to ask her? I was like, I don't know. Like literally, what God present to me, I ask. And everything that keeps coming up in my mind to ask is, how much of an effect do your past have to play with, you know, your sexuality or your sex life? And I say that because at a young age, I was in a world to where, like I said, everything was normal. Everything that I saw was normal. Like I'm watching my my older sister get molested right in front of me, and I'm like, what are y'all doing? You know? And now obviously I'm like, oh, I want to mess with that dude. I want to not threaten them, but obviously make those judgments.
As long as it stays in your head, right? Yeah, behavior is different. If it stays in your head,
and I'm so verbal and like outspoken in a respectful way. But kind of back to that is I always, I would say honestly, when people ask me like, when did I lose my virginity? I should say is. I want to say around like 11 or 12, honestly, or even earlier than that. And it was actually one of my sister's best friends. Yeah. So if you think about it, she's 3 years older than me.
Okay.
So at 11 or 12, 3 years older than me, she's a teenager.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, well, I thought it was normal. My mom didn't really say anything. She's not a horrible mom. Don't get me, don't get it wrong. She tried her best for sure. She only was, given the opportunities. She took advantage of everyone. Even to this day, she's still alive and kicking, thank God. But the overall question is, how much do you see or hear, or even in your sessions, that someone childhood trauma play a factor into their sex life? And my next question is really ideally like specific to me.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask it.
Specific to
you.
It's
specific to me. Okay. But I want you to kind of answer that aspect.
What do you think about it? I know that's such an easy question, but it's for you specifically. But to answer the first part, though, I think that's at the core of what I do. That is usually where we go back to. It depends on the client, right? I don't need to know all of the stories, but to understand how you're functioning now, what's important to you, how you're interacting in your relationships. I tell everybody, it goes back to, we learn how to love ourselves and others based on who loved us first.
Yeah.
And there are some people that had amazing experiences, and that's wonderful, right? So that sets them up to go into the world knowing like, okay, this is how I care about myself. This is how I'm going to show up for that person.
Yeah.
For those of us like myself, don't want to make assumptions, but it sounds like you've had some tough things, right? We don't necessarily get the messages we think that we're getting. And so we will now then start to play them.
Yeah.
To play them out, right?
That's so important because and I open up to everybody, but I still got like chills just sitting here and talking and communicating with someone in your high profession, because I'm like, man, what?
I'm more nervous talking into a mic, so you've got that on me.
You're fine. But like growing up, like it affected me, to answer your question. It affected me so much because one, I look at and respect women more than I do males. I've never had a male figure, not obviously for sexual reasons, no, but it taught me how to specifically treat women in a way. And I'm not perfect, and I never was, but I would say my sex life in my past relationship had a lot of trauma, I would say, because it wasn't like natural in a way. It was more like forced, and I had to do it to be in that relationship in a way. And so I say with, that individual in my past relationship, like, well, what was my issue was, and this is where I get my specific question.
Sure.
I was always the one to initiate it. I was always the one to initiate it. Like, okay, well, am I not doing something right? Am I not, in a right space, or are you just not in this relationship anymore?
Right.
To where I'm like, okay, well, how, why, what am I doing wrong? So I was always the main one to initiate it. I was always the main one to do this. And that made me feel less of a person, less of a man. Right. But I'm sitting here like hearing you speak, and I'm like, man, what? Like, why? I never, like, I thought about it, but I never really, really opened up to a therapist. And I'll say this, and I said it to your husband, and your husband is like right here behind the camera looking at me laughing. Y'all can't see him, but he's behind here laughing. I told him this.
Oh, he'll tell all the secrets.
Yeah, he definitely will. But I told him this. I went through so much as a child, as a teenager, as an adult, just based off those sexual experiences, the childhood, everything combined. There's a specific topic I want to get at too, but we'll save that for later. But
if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
But when it comes to initiation, what I tell everybody too is everybody wants to feel wanted.
Yeah. And
that's usually what initiation is.
Yeah, just feeling wanted.
Yeah, you want to be seen in a certain way.
Yeah.
Right?
That is true.
You want and sometimes that's your body, but sometimes that's you unique to that person. And so yes, like a lot of people be like, I've always got to ask. Well, the reason it's painful over time. I'm not saying that's how you experienced it, but for a lot of people, it's, I just want that opportunity for once to feel like this person wants me. And it can feel like rejection, whether it's intentional for the other person, you know.
It's deep. It gets deep. Like, I thought about it more on a deeper level because I'm like, dude, like when people, you know, your friends in high school would be like, when did you lose your virginity? I'm like, bro, I don't even know. And they'd be like, what? I'm like, I really don't know. And so like over the years, like I'm just thinking like everything and like preparing myself for this conversation. I don't never prepare myself as in written down questions, but I mentally think like, how can I connect with this person? How can I connect with the person I'm bringing in on my podcast? And I'm like, okay, well, I have to be vulnerable, kind of like how you mentioned, to open about these things. So I start thinking about questions that relate specifically to me or, you know, experience, right? So overall, I would just say like my problem is in that aspect, like how do I feel if I get rejected, right? Yeah. How did I feel when I used, not now, because obviously I'm engaged, but during that, me and Sadie, my fiance, it was different. We met on different terms. We met on some, I'm going to go out to the club, and my mindset was different. Okay. So kind of just bring me up to, I guess, your college kind of career, because that's not an easy topic or an easy profession to go in, and you're at a young age to where you really got to be, you know, dialed into that.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I'm 35 now. At that time, I just don't think personally, right? Like it was something I just never, what I tell everybody is you can do something and not understand it. Yeah. And so that's what cracked me up, is clearly had been having sex, you know, had 2 kids, clearly. Like, I knew, here we are. I had like probably 9 people looking at my cervix, but I couldn't tell you where it was. Yeah. And I think it was that I just wanted to understand myself better. To me, it's also in our society, like you're talking about, like it's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Yeah. So it's so much a part of most people and who they are, but we don't actually talk about it. Or when it's talked about, it's not in vulnerable ways usually. Yeah. It's just, you're supposed to be doing this. And I think that's what I wanted to understand. I also wanted to understand, so for myself, you know, and I'm sure my husband would feel differently too, but the way that I was raised is, it was like, oh, okay, Brittany, you're the smart one, you know, like you're the smart one. Yeah. But then I looked around and the message I got was you have to be attractive. And not only do you have to be attractive, the only way that you can be seen, this is how my brain interpreted it, is do men want to have sex with you? Yeah. If they don't, what you have to say, who you are, where you want to be doesn't matter. Yeah. And so I knew that wasn't correct. Yeah. But I knew that that's how it showed up in my mind. Right. And that's, now I just, here. And then wanted to understand, and the more and more that I started working with couples. Yeah. I joke the next thing I'm going to have to do is become a financial advisor, because it's finances, right? Like finances and sex is usually what it would come down to in these conversations. And and it's a lot. And if you don't have the right information, you know, my biggest thing is I never want to do harm. And so I knew, like, I am passionate about this. It's so interesting to me. There's so much I didn't know. And I need to understand what I'm talking about. And to be fair, what's also funny is, right, like my husband can tell me things. I can hear guys say things. Truly working with everyone, but especially working with men. Yeah. I just would have never thought, right? Really? Like the experiences, the way that people talk about things. Yeah. It blows my mind, right? Like, and I know amazing. This isn't, it's not everybody's experience, right? But then I'm working with men, you know, and they'll say things like, I need your help. Like I'm always going to the strip club, or I'm in this like really happy relationship, but I keep, you know, doing these things I'm not supposed to. And then when we start really getting down to it, and we realize it's about connection. Yeah. It's about being seen. And you could have just never told me that guys were going to the strip club to be seen and to just talk to someone. That's amazing. And it just, as you know, as a woman, I'm like, yeah, right. You know, like, sure. Yeah. No, but you can't deny it when you've got one after the other just explaining to me that there's this other side.
That is tough, because I dealt with more of a, like, let's say in my last relationship, like I wasn't the man I was supposed to be in that relationship. So where I was like really not focused on that particular relationship. I was cheating. I'll just say that I was cheating. And like, it wasn't necessarily the sexual pleasure, or I guess the attachment, I should say. But even before it got to that, right? What, like thinking about it now, I'm like, damn, I was really attached emotionally to this person, but how can I, open up my feelings without verbally open up?
Right.
Well, that's me sleeping with that person because I knew, like, if I'm doing that, that person is going to automatically feel attached to as well because they're being, valuable or vulnerable. And so I'm like, damn. So now during the whole high school and college phase, I'm like, okay, I did this person, did this, and it came obviously to a failed relationship. But so my question, and I want all men to listen to this, how do you feel about adult filmmaking and how that actually plays a role into your relationship? Ooh. Oh, I done strike something.
What type of adult filmmaking?
Like adult porn.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel about that to where do you feel like it'll play a factor into your relationship, your sex life and things like that? Like, do you hear about that often?
Oh yeah. Like, just making sure. Do you mean like watching already produced, or you mean creating it? Just to be clear.
So already produced. Now, if you creating it, hey, look, y'all own with that.
I'm like, get paid.
Actually produced already on the internet. You have to type in something on Google.
So my research is in couples and pornography, right? Yeah. I don't know how UNLV allowed it, but we actually brought couples in to watch pornography and asked them about their experiences, right?
What?
Yes, it's a whole thing.
I gotta go to UNLV. No, just kidding.
So here are my personal thoughts, right? Is as a sex therapist, I am pro porn. I am pro as long as no one's being harmed and exploited, and that's where it gets a little tricky, right? No, I don't think porn by itself is inherently bad. Yeah. And what's interesting too is, I can't believe I'm saying this, some of my views come from Howard Stern, actually. Yeah. So one of his interviews, I know, not who I would have thought that I would have endorsed. But what he talks about is, he says there's this generational thing, I'm kind of summarizing, which is even him growing up, right? I could be totally messing up this story. Please Google for accurate details. Go ahead. But what I took away from it is, he was like, no, like, my mom was saying, like, yeah, I'm assuming it was like a penthouse or something, and was just like, hey, just know these aren't real women's bodies. Yeah. And that's kind of what I think too, is as long as you know what you're watching. My only issue is that you've got, what I think research shows, average age of first access to pornography is about 9, right?
9.
Yeah. I wish I was wrong. I've got 2 boys. 9. But it's that you don't know what that is.
That's all right.
Right? Double check. Check those.
Yeah.
Right? And so my thing is, it's not, I think people need to know about it. It's, do you understand that what you're seeing isn't real? And so this is kind of like a little strategic trickery. That's kind of one of my favorite things to talk to, especially like men, about, is, do you know that what you're watching on there is, a majority of it is fake. It's performative.
See, in my mind, I'm thinking like, all right, I see the real parts. I see the real people. And it's like, no, this is real. But then now you're saying that it's not. So, oh man, I'm going to put myself in a hole. But like, do you feel like it definitely, you said you're pro, as long as you know the I would say the history behind it and what you're watching.
The troubling part too is feminist porn, which you have to pay for, which no one is. That I endorse, right? Because you know that these people are being paid well. You know that they're being protected on set. You know, I mean, we hope that you know, right? My only concern with pornography is, do you know if it's ethically produced, right? Yeah. And then also on that is, we just know, and here's the thing, especially in our training, right? I will never, we talk about, you never yuck someone's yum, right? Yeah. So this isn't to kink shame anybody. It's more so, we just know that in a lot of these things, you're seeing some of these actors portraying things that they're not comfortable with, right? And they're portraying things that are made for the male gaze, right? Yeah. And so that's my only problem, is when I'm working with a couple or I'm working with an individual, right? And he's like, okay, we're doing this. I'm going to be talking some details. You might need to edit some of this out, right? Is they're like, yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to do that. And then, but she won't have anal with me. And I'm like, well, did you ask her if she even likes that? Well, what do you mean?
Got a point.
Did you, what if she's not into that? She could be. Yeah. My whole thing is I think when we're watching these things, you assume that it's real and you take in a certain experience.
Yeah.
So that's my only thing is you need to ask if these things that you've been exposed to, are they real and are they for everyone, right? When we did research, right, there's this formula, right? And the main formula for a lot of pornography, at least at the time, is there's oral penetration, cum shot, right? Okay, but what if your partner isn't necessarily isn't into some of these different things? And is this for performance? The other issue kind of gets into more of like a deeper level, which is if you are, and this is what Howard Stern talked about too, right? Is the way that most of my generation, for sure, is you're exposed to pornography, assuming you're going to be masturbating because masturbation is healthy.
Normal.
Yes. You now are only focused on your own internal experience.
Yeah.
And so I think what can happen is now you are only used to having to be focused on what is yours, what you're into, what's pleasurable for you.
Yeah.
And from the very get-go, we're not always as in tune with what our partner, what they're into.
That's true. And man, you just stroke like, oh my gosh. Cause like, I remember my relationship and I was always wanting to make sure I was pleased first. And I was like, no, you're good. Kind of brush that off. And something just hit my head to ask. And it's definitely a topic that I know you're well professed in. It's like, how do you feel about like monogamy and like multiple sex partners? Because then it leads back to like, well, are you actually in it for the right thing? Or how do you feel about that?
Yeah. So a lot of what I work with is consensual, non-monogamy, polyamory, and there's lots of different definitions for that. But no, what I don't think a lot of people know if they're not either well-versed or in the communities is I actually think that to have more than one partner, whether that's just emotionally, whether that's just sexually or both, it takes a lot of maturity and foundation. Yeah. And so I think it can be a beautiful thing. And for a lot of relationships, I think it's a beautiful thing if you know why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And if you are respecting all parties involved, right? Where I see it go awry is when it's an attempt to heal from infidelity.
That's what I was going to get to.
Yeah.
I feel like it was just like, I definitely respect it. It's not something that I would, put myself in, but.
And it goes against a lot of people's values, right? If we're talking whether faith, whether ethic, it's not for everyone.
I'm just selfish. I'm just selfish. Like, I'm sorry.
Awareness
I'm just selfish.
Is key.
Like, I'm cool. Like, nah, if that's what you want to do, all right, bye. But I'm just selfish. Like, what's mine is mine. I'm not sharing. And so that's why I say I respect it.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like a lot of people get into that because it's like almost a cheat code into, cheating in a way, is what I tell people.
It can be if everyone's not being super intentional about why they're doing it, and especially if the relationship's not in a good place.
Yeah, that's where it gets thrown up a lot.
Yeah, and then there's all of these different types. There's the different hierarchies. It gets into a lot. So no, I mean, I'm sure it's going to be super frustrating. My answer almost always is it depends.
Yeah. Like, geez.
It depends, right? Because, and these are things I definitely was not raised around. And I'm going to be scrolling a lot. But the one thing too, that I think these messages that kind of led me in to the field is nobody ever sat me down and said this out loud, but I got the message of men cheat. They can't help it. Yeah. Poor things, bless their hearts. It's just going to happen. Yeah. And I genuinely thought that was true. And it created a lot of insecurity even in my relationship, right? Of no matter what I do, if I'm good enough, or to find the way that I'll be good enough is to know that he won't cheat. I have such a different view on that now. Yeah. Not because I don't love my partner, but it's like, if you really think that there is something else of value, please go.
Just go.
Please go. Yeah. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be here. Yeah. Like, I will respect you.
That's amazing.
Because I used to be so insecure, right? And I think that's what, to be completely, well, not I think I know, that's what made me want to start researching pornography so much, is deep down. I was never going to say this out loud. I will now. I was so insecure on pornography.
Really?
So insecure around pornography because there's these women that look nothing like me.
Yeah, they look different.
They look different and they do a lot of work, most of them. So it's not to hate on them, but it was this, okay, wait, if my partner is seeking this out, that means I'm not good enough.
Right.
Right. I'm doing something wrong. I'm not doing enough. And I need to either emulate what they're doing or
yeah. Okay. So now that you touched on that, I wish your husband was just.
He conveniently left.
Yeah, he just conveniently left. I'm like, I think he just knew what we were about to get into in general. He's like, nah, you ain't about to get me in trouble. So how did that like your specific role into your profession play into your marriage? Like, how did that, because like you mentioned, like if this is what he's after, if this is what he finds interesting, like how did that play into your marriage?
It was for me and the other, in my cohort that were doing the research with me, I think that's what we talked about is like, what we were trying to figure out is the way that we grew up anyway. Yeah. Is you just know men are watching porn. You just know that they are, but you don't talk about it. Yeah. And by the way, women are too. But a lot. Yeah. But times have changed. Yeah. But but you don't talk about it. Yeah. And it was this like huge. Okay, so like with boyfriends, whatever, we've been together a long time too. So there wasn't. But I don't care. I don't care. Who cares? For some reason, I was like, what is it that now I am emotionally invested in this person that now I'm upset? And that's what was so confusing for me, right? Is I have nothing against any type of sex work, but there was something about being in this intimate relationship that now it was viewed as a threat. And I'm so grateful that I think doing a lot of the work that I've done, hearing from other people, doing the research, I'm so grateful that I feel much differently about it now. But it was definitely tough. It was that there's this expectation that if I don't look a certain way, if I don't do something,
that's what I was thinking. Like that expectation of you have to do this, it has to be this way. Yeah, it makes a lot of issues kind of I guess uprise a little bit
for men too.
Hard. Yeah, for men. And so like for me, I always seen stuff online talking about it, and I think one of the biggest aspects that I learned is I had to stop watching porn, I should say, is because it wasn't like anything bad, but I was like expecting more out of like my past relationships or in just hookups, I guess. Yeah. I had to stop because I was really expecting what I saw on the screen out of that person. And then like, if that person didn't do it, then I automatically would think like, oh no, you're not for me. I'm cool. So yeah, that's amazing because you're in a tough field. I'm sorry.
I love it. I tell everybody I get to talk about things that you're not supposed to talk about for a living. And I enjoy it, right? Like you're not supposed to talk about sex. You're not supposed to talk about, religion, politics, culture. I get to talk about all
everything.
of them.
Everything. That's actually
I'm so grateful for it.
So like
so fun.
You mentioned culture. Like how did that really like affect you? Because obviously you got people around you and things like that. How did you ever like get judged for it, or like family members, friends?
Well, what I think back to, and my husband and I talked a lot about this, I can even remember even just being in high school talking with friends, and so this was way back, right? We didn't even have MySpace yet. I'm dating myself. And so, you would go on, online and everybody's name was like, Big Papa 69. And you're like, who knows? You're talking to like, who knows who, know? But it was funny. And then you would get like a picture of some guy's dick and you're just like, oh my gosh.
Like, oh my gosh.
Like that's so funny. So I just remember I didn't get the memo that a lot of the other girls got, which is like, okay, yeah, you can be curious about it. You don't talk about it. Yeah. And so guys would be talking about it. I wanted to talk about it. I thought it was interesting. Sex seemed really cool. Yeah, it didn't go well. Yeah. See, and that's what I learned is like, boys can talk about this. Boys can joke about it. Yeah. As women, it's kind of this unsaid like thing. You're supposed to just be a participant and you have to wait. Yeah. You need to wait until it's initiated upon you. And you definitely don't talk about it. You will be talked about, but you definitely don't talk about it.
How do you feel about that? Because we brought it up before we actually started filming. Yeah. But that old saying that if you're frowned upon as a female if you do it more than what I guess a guy should, or you're doing the equivalent, from the, I don't know. Can I say this on YouTube? Can I? being a hoe or being like a slut or something. And like, how do you feel like, I guess my question is leading to, do you feel like you have to go out there and be vulnerable or experience that to be in a happy place in life? Do you feel like, you know, you would have to go out there and just be free?
I just want it to be fair. Or like, I just want it to be, because also the thing that we haven't talked about, all of this hurts men as well. In my little humble opinion.
I'm all for it.
You know, but no, and I think that's what I tell people all the time, right? Is when even though I do sex therapy, a lot of what I do is we'll talk about sex a little bit, but really it's to understand your sexuality, your gender, to know who you are. It's so much deeper than that. It's your, like you said, your past experiences. What were you exposed to? And so, for example, when we're just doing, you know, basic emotion awareness stuff is, I mean, stereotypes are terrible, but in this case, you know, I'll use the stereotype of a lot of men are raised where you can feel angry. You can talk about sexual excitement, but you better not talk about sadness or fear, because I do not know if you can say these. You guys will edit them, right? If you can, because if you were to feel sad or if you were to feel scared, well, you're a pussy, you know, or gay.
I talk about it.
Oh my gosh.
It's so bad because, and that's why I created my podcast a little bit, a lot of it. But I want a lot of people to be open to talking about any and everything. And people always ask me, like, sometimes even at work to this day, and this is working at where we both work now, and I communicate with a lot of different people, not male or female specifically, but if I'm communicating with a female, I'm looked at as I'm flirting or anything like that, and something like that. But what I want to mention is, if I'm seen as opening up, like you mentioned, I'm soft, I'm gay or anything, like, no, it's crazy. And my fiance, she does an amazing job, because my favorite holiday, and I'll mention it in every video, is not Christmas. It's a beautiful holiday. Thanksgiving, beautiful. It's actually Easter, and then I call it a holiday, but men's mental health awareness. Aww. That's actually one of my favorite times, because I'm opening it up. I'm open to talk about everything. I'll go sometimes hug her at night and just cry, and she'll be like, "Why are you crying?" I'm like, "I don't know." But I'm cool. Like, sometimes I just cry because I'm happy. I'm just happy and things like that. And so I'm going to say this. And the reason why I'm so nervous, and this is going to strike a topic, I never valued the aspect of a therapist. I'm gonna be honest. I respect
my whole family still doesn't, and I am one. Okay, so you're good. We're good.
Like, it just felt like, for me personally, there was not one thing that a therapist could tell me that I didn't know. Because I've been through so much, and I got through it all on my own, to where I had to learn how to think differently. I had to learn how to adapt differently. To, you know, realizing that I had anxiety before a doctor told me, things like that. And so now I'm sitting here with you. My respect just went a lot higher than what I ever did. Now, I wouldn't say for all therapists, but for you specifically. I'm just saying.
Just me.
Just for you, because, like, and it's not a bad blood through, you know, about anything or anybody, but the reason why I that I say that statement is because when I was younger and I was going through all these things, my therapist, they always talk about that one bad apple. The first thing he told me was, let's put him on Ritalin. And I was on it, and I was a zombie. And then next, you know, they put me on IEP in school, the individual education plan, to where I had special requests or special things that would happen during the school. I would have to be separated from my peers. I'll be in a class full of other individuals. And so this is like maybe 6th grade. And so literally, so where I would say dislike or my discomfort coming from that aspect is because, one, I feel like I got put in a situation to where I got told just to take this and you'll be okay. And so literally, and I promise you, so I don't know if I told you, but I have 2 moms. So my biological mom, and then her sister, which is my mom, but she's actually my aunt. She was fighting for my life. And I'm going to say that. She was fighting for my life. And her name is LaShawn. And she's in child behavioral, that field. And kind of, not to go on a spiel, but she would go up to the school with me every day and say, he doesn't need to be on this. This is a smart kid. He's super smart. And they're like, nope, too late. He's already on it. And so we had to fight so much for them to take me off something as an IEP in Ritland for them to, you know, prove. So it came to the point where I started skipping my original classes, started going to my AP classes. And I was like, I'm passing classes more than what these non-normal kids is. Y'all got me on this for what?
Right.
So they were like, oh, now we see like whatever he can test out. So my discomfort comes from that, to where I don't look at therapists highly. So that's why I was so
understandably
nervous.
So. Oh no, there's so much harm. By the way,
nervous.
This could be like a 6-hour conversation just from like what. No, because there's real harm. I like to look at positive, and I like to believe that most therapists are trying to do their best. But first of all, if a therapist isn't doing their own work, they're going to play all that out. The other thing too is I hope it's getting better, but just throwing it out there, the white girl that's going to tell you about your experience but Black boys are more likely to be diagnosed with behavioral disorders.
And that's just facts. And that's what I tell people is, and I love that we could have this conversation because I'm 27 and you're older than
35.
I'm going to say that respectfully. You're older than I am. But I tell people, if we can't have a conversation, then why am I talking to you? So if there's someone out there in general to where I came across and I told them, like, for instance, I'll just say this. We'll talk, like some of my friends will talk about like in Black Lives Matter, and they'll be like, what? I'm like, I don't support it. They'll be like, why? This is, mind you, the criminal aspect. They'd be like, I'll be like, I don't support it. They're like, why? You're Black. I was like, what? I was like, well, I'm gonna be honest. I don't support it because it's an organization that was actually, you know, doing a lot of illegal stuff with the funding that was meant to be there for specific reasons. So I'm not supporting that organization, but I'll support Black lives. But on the back end, racism happens to both sides. It's just only talked about one-sided. You know, other people get racism thrown towards them just as much, but it's just not talked about as much. So I can't pick a side. Now, is there more severe racism, I guess, situations that my culture been in? For sure. But I just can't disregard everybody else's. You know?
No, I think that's fair. We might have to agree to disagree, which is interesting because
No, that's fine. That's fine. That is fine. That is fine.
And what I mean by that is, I think, but see, here's, you know where my brain is going? My brain is going is in a clinical place because reverse racism doesn't exist.
Yeah. Okay. I want to
But I'm being a stickler for terms, right?
Yeah.
Because, I use, right. So like we could even use this room, right? Technically one white woman, there's multiple Black men. The thing is, I still sadly, maybe not in this room, I'm just using the example, but if I go into a space, I am still treated as, in the majority, right? Yeah. And so there can be bias for sure. Yeah. But I think that's a powerful part of what I do too, right? Is that, these dynamics at play, and they are very much a part of everything that we do.
For sure.
Everything that we do. There's, we're getting way into it, but like, so there's so a lot of my work, by the way, if anybody wants to kind of just see, is based off of Bell Hooks. And so she was a Black educator, activist, and feminist, right? And my favorite book is The Will to Change, about men, masculinity, and love, right? So a lot of my work comes from her amazing work. And lost track, sorry, got all excited.
You're good.
But I think that's why, actually, I think where even sex therapy comes into play here, right? Is because all of these dynamics have shaped who we are. Sorry, it's back. Thank you, because I did need I did need Ritalin when I was little, and I didn't get any. But
you're good. I love it.
So, but going back to losing my train of thought again. I got all excited. Take your time. Let me think. Bell Hooks got that one in there. There was another book. That's why I'm trying to think.
Who was it with?
It's gone. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
To edit all of this. this out.
Okay, so no, you're fine. He edited it.
Help me get back on track.
Okay, so question though. I get your standpoint, and like you said, agree to disagree.
Yes.
So do you think it's more racism or more cultural differences? Because there's a big difference to where a lot of my culture will get things. The reason why I say I think racism goes both ways, because if you were to go to my cookout, and it's mostly with black people, they're gonna say, "Look at this. Why is this white lady here?"
Yes,
that's racism, in a way. Yes, that's it's not coming directly towards you at that moment, but it's being told or talked about in a group.
Ooh, it's back. Thank you. You brought me back to the book is my grandmother's hands, right? So what they talk about in that situation, right? Or even just in a therapy room, if I am so grateful to be able to work with men and women of color, right? All of our even bodies have had to adjust to being around, right? Someone. And so we take that in. So yes, you're right. Like, and I married into, Latino culture. And so same thing. It was just like, who's this white girl coming in here? And I get that, but I will still be safe.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's different. That's amazing, because I tell that story about racism, and I talk about racism, and I love my culture. My culture is I respect all cultures and things like that, and I love experiencing it. I went to a Muslim funeral before, and my best friend, my best friend is literally he committed suicide, and he was Muslim, and I never been to another different cultural like funeral or anything. And I walked in there, it looked at me. They didn't say it, but you can read it on their face. They can read it in, their demeanor and things like that.
Yeah.
I respect everything that comes with, obviously being an African-American male, things like that. My question specifically to you is, how do you feel when people hear, like, you get those questions, or do you ever get those questions where they be like, well, as a black man, you should be dating a black female. You should be dating in your culture. Like, why are you going towards a white girl? Am I not, valuable enough? I'm like, how do you feel about that?
I have lots of I mean, I can't speak from personal experience. The only limited experience I have is when people meet me, they assume that I'm, married to a white boy, which is fine. Just not my jam. So yeah, I hear of this. Obviously it's not something I pretend to know from experience. I think, I don't see anything as problematic, but I can understand it. I think my limited understanding, right, is that because especially black women's bodies over time being devalued and objectified and sexualized, which, and then we can talk about just people of color in general, and how that comes into sex therapy and how they appear. Anyway, but I think also what I always want to double check, I tell people, I want you to be into what you're into and attracted to who you're attracted to, right? I don't, for example, I mean, I can appreciate that, white men are attractive. I don't,
just not your cup of tea.
Have I ever? I don't know. I don't think I've ever dated a white man. I'm like just double checking for facts.
Wait. He's not. He's
half.
Whoa.
He's half.
For real?
He's half white. So I guess technically, yeah.
He didn't tell me this. Not like he's supposed to, but I'm like, what?
So I wouldn't want someone telling me who I'm allowed to be, attracted to. The thing that I find interesting, and it's even funnier, well, not funnier, it's curious, right? Because I am a white woman, is when I'm working with clients where they will talk to me about like, oh, no, I am really, really into this type of woman. And I'm like, well, first of all, that's a majority of porn, which is fine.
Yeah.
Just know why. And then also, is that because you're actually attracted to them, or is that because you've been taught that this ideal view of what beauty is? Have you internalized that?
You're hitting all points that I thought about. I'm like, this is wild, because like having
that's
a
not
conversation.
Towards you, of course.
No.
Just in general.
I thought about it because both of my my fiance and the mother of my two older kids are white, and I remember, and my dad is probably gonna look at me like, what the fuck? I remember coming home the first time, and he's like, all right, cool. Second time, he's like, do you just not like black girls? Like, and so my thing is, it goes back to cultural like differences.
Yes.
It really, for me specifically, I can't speak for everybody else, but like, I didn't realize how big of a role that all ties in together. Now that you're sitting here communicating about it in your profession, I'm like, this is blowing my mind. And it's like making me think like, damn, do I actually like do this? Am I, it's
and there's
amazing.
nothing wrong with it. That's what I mean, we were talking a little bit before it started is, to me, as long as no one's being harmed and there's nothing that you can just absolutely say is wrong. As long as everybody's not being harmed. Yeah. It's more, I want people to know, why are you doing what you're doing?
Right.
And if you know why you're doing what you're doing, then that's okay, right? But for a lot of us, I know me, I still am figuring out things, right? Because we just kind of go about something, or like you talked about before, which I feel terrible, we should probably go back and touch on, right?
You're fine. Let's go.
We normalize and we assume that what's going on is just that, without recognizing how we've taken that in. And just what it means, how we feel about ourselves. That's really,
that's amazing. And so I got a question, because I know he had brought it up to me. How do you feel? And we talked about it before, but when you get out of a relationship, right?
Yeah.
And the female ends it so abruptly, right?
Okay.
They'll just end it up abruptly and just say, I don't want to be in a relationship. And this is coming from experience.
Yeah.
But he's a best friend of mine. I promise you. I feel so open to talk about it because he's right here. He wants to know because he's lost.
Gave you permission.
He definitely did. He definitely did. He's 19 and he has everything going for himself. And I'm not just saying that because he's right here. Like I said, I always speak facts over opinions.
Yeah.
But he has 19. He takes care of was female. And she just randomly just up and left.
Random?
And so he goes out and, maybe he's having fun. He's having fun, right? But he's also, he was taking care of that person for a long period of time. What would your advice be specifically to him? Because he doesn't want to, he's been tied in with this person for a long period of time, and for it just to end. And then now when, since they've been broken up, he's finding himself all over again, and he's meeting these beautiful women, because in the profession that he's in, it's hard. But what would your advice be? Like, is that something bad? Is that something like a therapist would be like, nah, stay away from? Or
maybe another therapist would. For me, because I'm a sex therapist, I'm like, get it in, like whatever you need to do. But is this causing any harm?
Like you said,
right? Like, well, and then again, my biggest thing is just, what is sexual health? I think a lot of people, we look at sexuality and just assume what's good or what's bad.
Right.
What's healthy? Everybody consenting?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. You don't have to answer anything out loud, or I'm just going to throw stuff out there, right? Is everything being safe? Okay.
Oh my God. I told you, nothing's off limits. I talk about everything.
Because truly, for both, I want both, 3, 4, whoever's there, I just want everybody to feel
if y'all can see his face right now, this is amazing.
I just want everybody to feel emotionally and physically safe, right? But no, like, as for, I see what you're saying though, right? For many of us, we're raised that if it's like, especially if there's a lot, like, what does that mean? What does that mean? You don't have to answer any of this, just thoughts to ask yourself, right? It's like, also, do they understand that this is just
most definitely
perfect?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So then no harm. There you go.
No harm.
Start losing the insight of like, oh.
So they catch feelings.
Like him now.
Yeah, they catch feelings.
I don't like you.
Yeah, and that brought me. You got a good point, because, like you said, if you were to, when I used to do that, like, I caught feelings so quick because I was doing it. Okay, I'm honest, the truth. Not always. I was doing it for a specific reason. I just wanted to do it just because I know I could. Yeah. I was a key athlete in college. I was someone that a lot of people looked up to where I'm like, I always had an entourage.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to the individuals that's just, no, scratch that. When God present me with something, I got to speak on it. How do you feel about like OnlyFans? It's similar to the adult, pornography things, but how do you feel about females doing that?
I think it's
even
wonderful.
Men. I should say
I think it's
too.
wonderful. Yeah, I know. See, that's the other thing too, is just sadly, men, there's not as much of a market.
Right.
I think there will be. That's what I think will be. I think society just isn't ready for that side of it. Because again, for men to be successful on OnlyFans, that would require permission for women to be soliciting that.
Honestly, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not that, I mean, I won't speak for all women, not going to do that, but I think there could be a market. The society part has to catch up, right? And then there's a lot of concepts which I have even clients that'll push back and be like, well, yeah, but you guys wouldn't have to pay for it. Right. And I'm like, you're not wrong. So society's got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But no, I think I have clients that are on OnlyFans. I think it's amazing as long as, same thing, right? Is the thing that I love about it too is it's providing so much more. Yeah. So yes, I think for a lot of people, I just want to see something. I just want to have an experience. Yeah. For other people, and you'll hear this everywhere, like loneliness is such an epidemic. And so my heart breaks because so many of the clients that I'm working with cannot connect with someone. Right. They don't have the same experience as having 8 people in a short
Hey, he's freshly out there. He in his bag. He in his prime Vegas, man.
But truly, and so that's why I feel really strongly that we need to have outlets like that because it keeps everybody safe. I also just want people that are creating content getting paid. And so that's, again, kind of going back to the pornography thing. I don't have anything against it, but it's more, I want people getting paid for what they're doing. And so with OnlyFans, I love it. Many of the creators are in control. And it actually, because for a lot of people, what they talk about is it's not just wanting to subscribe. They get content where their name is being stated. Yeah. They get content where they're asking this person to, I even have people where they don't ever take their clothes off. Yeah. The quote girlfriend experience, right? Yeah.
I never experienced it, but
I think it's wonderful. I think it's amazing. The only time, because again, it is not, this is something I think I shared before that I had to realize why I was so I'm so offended about all these things is I was seeing the wrong threat. Right. So I would have been the one saying that like, oh, these girls in porn or like whatever, when really it's like, well, if my husband is doing something that's outside of what our relationship said, that's not on these women. That's on him. So that's the only time it comes up is because I'll work with people that are like, hey, this is not okay in my relationship. Yeah. My partner does not know about this or found out and is upset. Yeah. But that's not OnlyFans' fault.
Yeah. So what do you say towards people that like, it's not happening as often in their relationship? Is it something like, what's a time span or I guess a timeline that, I mean, obviously you got schedules that can conflict this, but how often should people really be intuitive sexually with their partner?
Again, annoying answer. It depends because the answer that I would give, right, is if 2 people are in front of me and they're like, hey, we only have sex, we'll say once every 3 months. Okay. What does that mean to you? Yeah. It's not a problem. Is one of you unsatisfied by that? Right. Now we need to talk about it, right? Yeah. If you're having sex 8 times a day,
that's what I was getting to because growing up and even now, and say he's probably gonna hate me, but like it's every day. It has to be every day because I'm going to the gym every day. It's not only just because I want to release some stress or something like that or nothing like that.
It does that. Oxytocin release. Does. Yes. Oxytocin
it does for sure. Yeah. But for me, it has to be every day. It has to be, if possible, 3 times a day. But with kids, that's not possible. But how do you feel when the opposite or, you get a people or I guess a relationship in front of you and they're like, well, he wants it like this so often, but I just don't. And the reason is just... They don't just give you what would you say to individuals like that?
I would want to find out then just why, like, again, you don't have to answer anything, but that's what I would, because sex only means the value. It means what we allow it to mean. Right. So is this just a physiological release? Okay. She's tired. She's busy. She's, I'm assuming this is, heterosexual relationship. Like, does it bother her? Like, because if 2 people, if that's what they want to do and it works for them, it can be an amazing way to connect. Or by the way, you don't always have to connect. It can be wham, bam, like, and let's just move on. So I don't have any judgment about the why. It's more when someone's asking about frequency, that's the first question I ask is, what does it mean that you're not? Yeah. What would it mean if you were not doing that? If I can ask.
Yeah. So, and I love the question. Like if I wasn't doing that, it's like a lose-lose situation for me, right? Okay. Because if I wasn't, then she'll ask me, Not Sadie, but my last relationship too. Let's just use my last relationship.
Probably safer. Yeah,
probably a lot safer.
Let's do that.
You know, but well, are you not finding me attractive now? Mm-hmm. Are you not finding this relationship, you know, meaningful or something like? It led to that. I'm like, no, now I'm tired, but now I'm being looked at as a bad person because now I'm saying I'm tired. It would go like that. Now with Sadie, what I would say is, I understand it more when I want to, you know, put ourselves in those situations. The kids is gone and we're at home by ourselves or whatever, and we like, now is a perfect time, but she says I'm tired. I understand that mentally now, because one, she's a great mom. Before though, like I honestly said, in my last relationship, it was it was different. It was a lot different. It was really different to where I'm like, I'm cool, I'm just gonna go, you know. And if she would have told me no, like I can't, like, oh no, I'm tired, I didn't mentally think and process it how I would now. I would just go out to the club or to a bar and get it because I know I could. Yeah. And that's horrible, like for me. I don't know about, I'm not judging y'all.
You're not the only one. Yeah.
You know, that's when I was in a 6-7 year relationship already. Yeah. And so I would just be like, nah, I'm about to just go to the club because you told me no. I'm about to go do this or I'm about to go do that because you told me no. So I guess that would be my answer. Now I know mentally, you know, it's better. Y'all can't see this, but my daughter, she just got her hair braided and she's a daddy's girl and she's so specific. She's so adorable. If I could, I'm not bringing my kids on the podcast, but you guys would probably get hurt.
Do you think it's okay for someone to leave they're not pleased?
Yeah, so the question, if y'all can't hear, well, y'all probably can't, but he asked, do you think it's okay for someone to leave if they're not sexually pleased? Or
and you communicated.
And someone communicated that to him. Okay. And this is for all the people out there that want advice. Vegas, wherever you guys are at, if you guys want advice, she's going to relay her social medias, or I guess if you're in Vegas and you want to book an appointment, you guys, that aspect, not her personal stuff, but her business aspect.
I need to work on the business side of things.
If you guys want some information, again, don't ask me because I'm gonna tell you, like, go ask your mama or something. But I'll leave her stuff in the description below. But kind of he wanted to know that specifically.
Yeah, and sorry, and then we'll get back to I actually do, and so this is what's tough is. I always feel for both, like, I'm going to use like an example, right? Say that there's someone who says like, hey, I ask all these things. We've been trying to do all of this work, especially if they're coming to therapy. I have a lot of respect for that. Right? So if they are coming to me saying, hey, I want to do this more frequently, and they're just not, right? And and the perception is that they're not doing the work. I have a lot of empathy for that because, again, for not everyone, but for many people, their sexuality and sex is so much a part of who they are. Like, dramatic term here, but like it can be your lifeblood because it represents so many things, right? And I really feel for the person that's like, look, I love them. I'm attracted to them. I enjoy having sex, but it's not the first thing that comes to my mind. Right. And I feel for them too, because it's not that either one of them is better than the other. It's just different. And so sadly, I wouldn't want to see that result, obviously. But no, I think if you've got someone who's like, which we can talk about myths too about, because you brought up some that we all are raised with, right? Men and women. So these different myths, but I could see where if someone is just saying, hey, this is who I am. I am just not a very sexual person. Yeah. You know, I would not want to, demonize the person that's like, well, I very much am, and I need to go. But I also, not a tit for tat, but like exact same thing. If someone's coming to me and saying, hey, this is not because I'm not attracted to them. I love them deeply. Yeah. I just don't have as high of a libido, or sex doesn't mean the same thing as it does to my partner. I also don't want to, I would never force that person to now try to be more sexual, just as I wouldn't try to force that other person to shut it down. Right.
So do you think it's like reasonable? Let's say you guys are dating for like years, right? Or even months, and you guys are, I would say, sexually in tune, but then the person just says, no, I'm not it. Just to really leave, like just.
I didn't sign up for that.
And I'm speaking on his kind of experience. I can't speak fully for him, but he brought up a situation of his to where I'm taking care of this person fully. You have no complaints, and I'm asking you for one thing, and you can't do that. And he left. Well,
no, I got left.
Yeah, he got left. So what would you say in situations like that? Because I feel like as a man, I would have did exactly what he did. But coming from a female aspect, I want to hear from your point of view. Other than obviously my wife, other than her. But
I would start say this was like someone that I was working with. I would start asking about, well, clearly she wasn't happy though. You can provide all the things. Not to you specifically. This is just a general comment, right?
Speak it.
Right. So the first thing that I would want to ask about is like mental load. Like, all right, you can be providing, you can be doing all of these things. What is happening? What is she needing? A big thing when I work with couples, especially if they have kids, but any couple, right, is mental load, right? Yeah. She's got to handle the crude, I have a lot of like little dad jokes that I talk about all the time, right?
Go ahead.
But one of them is, the way, nothing against anyone's belief system, but the way that our bodies were made, right? If two zebras are running from a lion, you'll never see them stop and have sex with each other. Because they're going to die, right? So if you have someone, whether it's whatever partner, but let's just say in this situation we're talking about, it's a mother who's responsible for a lot of different things, right?
Yeah.
Also in today's society, she's also working. She's not just at home. She's working, she's providing, she's doing all this too. So if she either would express or say that she has anxiety, or let's just say a high level of stress, and you're wanting, so she literally figuratively feels like there's a lion chasing her all the time. And then you're like, what's up? You wanna hang out?
Yeah.
No.
That's
no. See, not at all.
Man, my mindset would have just been kicking you to the curb back then. I was not
no, now, you can now. You can now.
But it's so difficult because I feel, and you brought up a good point. Again, agree to disagree, but
you can.
I feel like men handle more mentally than females. I'm gonna say that in an aspect because if we were to go to Walmart, and obviously this is due to my career, being in law enforcement. If I go to Walmart, she's not going to notice everything that I deal with.
Oh yeah.
So I mentally, stressfully, handle everything right then and there. I know how to read the room. I know how to dictate, a lot of conversations, or mentally I hold the relationship together in an aspect from my side, but mentally she also does. I just have it more on a higher level. Yeah. So if I come home and I say, let's do it, and you say, no, I'm tired, I'm gonna get mad. But hold on. This is I'm honest, this is a huge eye opener, not only for me, but for, obviously you can tell, for him too as well, because we don't have, it's amazing hearing it from a different person point of view that honestly we never really met. And I consider you a good friend of mine now because you have an aspect to where I didn't realize in a therapist that really came out. So my therapist specifically is my pastor. She's a female pastor, and literally hearing you be talked about a lot at work by your husband is like,
yeah,
he literally scared the shit out of me. I'm gonna be honest, he scared me. He was like, bro, she be getting me sometimes where I have to just sit there.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, damn.
You need to because sorry to interrupt you, but you're good. I was not raised like this. Yeah. I was raised where, and kind of interesting, my poor family who listens to this, right? There's these interesting patterns, right? Where I was raised in rural New Mexico, but by West Texans, right? And so it was this very traditional, my mom and my grandmother, they keep house. They took care of us. Yeah. I don't even think the men in my family changed a diaper or did anything. And they worked and they did all of these things. And so that's how I was raised, how my husband was raised. And so this poor guy, I joke all the time, he's got such a hard time being married to a therapist because I didn't even know how to undo a lot of these things. And then all of a sudden I come home and I'm like, I'm pissed, and he's like, what? And I'm like, no, the mental load. I'm not supposed to be what? So
yes. As a therapist, and you mentioned that, and that's perfect. How do you handle, because therapists, they're very like well worded, and you know they learn some,
but yeah, some.
But they're not perfect, right? So how do you specifically handle? And I always wondered that myself. How do therapists like unwind? How do they really? Because they're seen as someone that controls their emotions a lot. They really know they're in tune with themselves. How do you specifically do that?
Well, and the first thing I will say too is I'm not the therapist for everyone, right? Like if you want to walk into a room with someone that looks polished and is going to have a clipboard and they're going to tell you that is not, you're going to freak out when you come and see me because I am this. Yeah. Right? The other joke that I say, not all, but the reason we get into the field, right? Some of us are real messed up. Like, so wounded healer is the polite way to say that, right? But we need to be doing our work first of all, right? Because, and this gets way into the deep thing, like if I'm going through something at home and then I'm working with a couple, if I'm not doing my work, I will accidentally start taking that out in my work, right? So first of all, you need to go to a therapist that is doing their own work, know the type of therapy that you want to, right? Sure, and for me, I deal with a lot of, so I do, of course, sex therapy, but I also do trauma. So unfortunately, but I'm so grateful for the work that I do. I work with a lot of gun violence victims. So whether that's law enforcement, whether that's mass trauma, mass shooting survivors. So I work with a lot of heavy stuff. I work with a lot of sexual trauma. I work with trauma. So I enjoy it because it's hard to hear, but I like being able to see what's called post-traumatic resilience, which we don't talk a lot, which is what you likely has, I don't know your whole story, but like what you've experienced, right? Is you can go through something awful and painful and yet you can learn something about yourself and come around the other side.
I love it.
So we have to do a lot of that is decompressing in between sessions. We have to do a lot of things, you know, at home, but to be honest with you, at the end of the day, I do have to watch and make sure that it's not making me less available to my husband and my family because I am drained.
That's deep because and kind of get a little bit off topic. If you had to, like you mentioned my story, right? If you had to ask me a question, if you had to like just to know my story more, what would it be? I want you to ask me questions. This is part of the podcast to where I want you to ask me questions. I want you to get the background of me and then, you know, kind of just...
Yeah, well, and I was going to go back too because you sort of mentioned it and then as usual, I scrolled around a little bit, so I apologize. But like even you talking about some of your first experiences that you look back and you're like, I don't even know how old or whatever. Would you have defined that as trauma?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, for sure. Because I would say defining it as trauma is what helped me realize that it was an issue. Okay. Notifying the issue up front at a later age and kind of backtracking a little bit and figuring out how it played a huge role into some of those things in my relationships. Oh yeah, it's definitely trauma. It's trauma.
Not good that you experienced it. Good that you have that awareness.
I disagree. I think it's good that I did experience it because it got me to exactly where I'm at today. Yeah. I'm not perfect. I'm not the richest, but I'm set to where I don't really have to worry about a lot. I still do, but I'm not all the way where I want to be at, and that's due to a lot. And Sadie, stop. Take her out. We'll just cut it out. Just go. I'll cut it out. Go, Tavares. She's a daddy's girl.
I know, baby.
Shut the door. Just take her in the room.
He's just like, okay.
I'll clap so you can get the noise pick up on it. But it is trauma. It's a lot of trauma because even now, and one of my biggest goals, and I mentioned this to him when we first started, I want my biological sister to come on the podcast because everybody always heard my story that I was this amazing athletic guy that didn't go far in sports, or I have the last name of a family originated in Iowa that was so notorious for violence that controlled a lot of the gangs and drugs. So everything that I went through, to answer your question on a more broad perspective, was trauma. Yeah. To open up, and then I'm going to open up a little bit. So if you have any questions, and just ask. But around that age, I also walked in on my mom trying to commit suicide multiple times. She was laying on the floor, kind of like how we are now, but on a longer couch. And I walk in on a Wednesday after school, And she goes, well, she's on the floor, and I go, Mom, what are you doing? I'm thinking she's just trying to go to sleep, just on the floor, whatever. Yeah. She was like, I'm tired. I'm just so tired and fed up. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm tired too. I just got back from school. She goes, no, I'm tired. I was like, oh shoot, like she's meaning something serious. So she's laid out on the floor, mouth open, started kind of like really talking funny. And she was like, I tried to kill myself by drinking bleach. And I was like, huh? And to this day, right hand to God, she doesn't talk about that story with anybody else but me. Yeah. She doesn't talk about it and why she did it. She doesn't talk about the deep aspect of it with anybody else but me. And mind you, her mom is still alive. Her sister is still well aware. They still communicate. Everybody knows about it, but she only talks about it with me. So I find that trauma. And I have this saying that I got from, I don't know if you heard of him, but Eric Thomas. He's a huge motivational speaker. His name is E.T. He said one statement before. He said, a negative times a negative is a positive. And that's true, because I keep getting all these negatives. How am I going to turn this into a positive? You have to complete these certain steps to turn it into a positive, just like in math. It seems simple to do, but a lot of people actually still can't do it. But I found out how to turn them negatives into a positives. One is this platform right here that I'm building is social media. So that's kind of.
And that's hard. That's hard, right? Because, and I'm with you that I never want to tell people that, like, oh, see this. Now, again, if it's part of who they are and their faith, I want them to say that if it's true to them. But I will never tell someone like, oh, see, you were supposed to go through this, because when you're just going through this, it almost makes, and you're in the pain, it almost makes it seem like it can actually do the opposite, where then people start to lose their faith, or they feel even more scared, right? But because you stated it that way, that's an example where, oh my goodness, and how old did you say you were?
27.
When you came home and
I was in 7th grade. Oof. Yeah. So I was 13, turning 14 maybe.
Oh yeah. So that year's already rough. 7th grade is already the worst. Yeah. And then to come home and see that, and even if you know a whole lot of things, that's one thing that none of us are ever prepared for. Yeah. And to be in that role. But I'm with you that once you get the support that you need, that can then help us move on to other things, right? Oh, yeah, and it is interesting to me. A lot of people that have been through a lot of trauma go into helping professions, whether law enforcement, therapy, medical. A lot of us take our pain, right, and then want to either prevent others from ever experiencing it.
For sure, and that's agreeable, because I try to. So before I was in law enforcement here, specifically back home in Iowa, I got denied so many times from police departments because of my last name. And I remember my chief, my Waterloo chief. His name is Mike Trelka, and he said one time we were sitting down at his table, just sitting there talking, and he goes, "I will never hire someone with a college degree." I'm like, what? He goes, I shouldn't say never, but I most likely won't. And mind you, he has a decade in law enforcement, so he knows what he's doing. Value chief for sure. And he was like, yeah, I won't hire anybody with a degree. I'm like, why? He goes, well, for one, there's not one state that really requires you to have a college degree to be a police officer. They recommend you have some college credits, but not required. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. But specifically you, why? He goes, I promise you, word for word, he goes, I could teach you book smarts, but I can't teach you street smarts. And I was like, you're right. And ever since that day forward, I implemented that in my own way, to where I try to adapt to, like, how does that, value my life and my situations now? Because I don't look at anybody differently. I don't look at homeless people differently. I'm aware of situations for sure. Yeah. But you mentioned that due to trauma, often we try to go into those professions to help. And I actually tried. I literally, and I'm going to be honest, I want to say 17, 18, I went to the men's and women's facility and started talking to the men's and women like in that facility back home in Waterloo. And it's 34-year-old people at that time, and I'm barely an adult. saying, bro, I really look up to you. And I'm not even in the best position possible. I'm maybe only a year or two outside of high school, to where I'm not professional. I'm not in a professional. I'm not rich. I'm not, in that where I'm at today. Then I wasn't in that position.
Yeah.
So I'm like, dang, to hear that feedback is dope. So, I really I try to think differently outside of my trauma. I sometimes I don't live in my past a lot, but what I'll do is revisit it to make sure that I'm not continuing to picking up these bad habits that I may be overlooking, because sometimes in relationships, right, you get at this standstill. You think that you're doing everything perfectly, and then you're getting complacent to where you're not.
Yeah.
And the other person has to speak up on it, and you stop doing the things that you did at the beginning. And so the reason why I love Sadie so much is because, like I said, my favorite holiday to me is Men's Mental Health Awareness. That's not a month for me. That's a holiday. So she'll take that specific time, even outside of that time, she'll be like, go do this for yourself. Mentally, what are you dealing with? And I know at that point I have to open up.
Yeah.
And so my mom, my aunt, but my mom, she deals with a lot of that child, I guess trauma stuff. So she'll call me and she'll be like, what are you doing? And she'll just automatically know like something's wrong. I'm like, what? So I think a lot of the trauma, I think everything that I went through in a negative aspect is trauma. There's not one thing I would sit here and say it wasn't. It is all trauma, but I learned how to turn it into a positive because I tell my story.
Yes.
I figured out my gift. God wanted me to speak. Yeah. God didn't want me to play basketball. God didn't want me to be a police officer. God didn't want me to be this no more. He was like, and I've been prolonging this for like years, by the way. This is not something I just did. I'm 27, so I've probably been prolonging it around 16.
Yeah.
And my pastor, she always told me, she was like, just hold up. I want you to get more under your belt. I'm like, dang. And so I hear people talk about a lot of stuff to where I'm like, bro, you just need to vent. So yeah, to answer your question, it would be all trauma for sure.
And I tell people the definition, right, is a significant event that changes the way you view yourself or the world. Yeah. Right. And so it's hard to define whether that's a specific thing. And then, again, going back to that post-traumatic resilience, I wish that the way our brains worked, that we learned from super positive events in the same way. But really painful events, they change us. Yeah, and, for sure. But that resilience factor is not that we would, some people would say, it sounds like you would say, right? Like, no, I wouldn't change a thing because it made me who I am. Even those that are like, I would have taken that out. However, and I guess, they learn something about who they are. And then for sure, to the nerdier aspect of it too, is it actually changes how we walk around. Right. So there's, I think for a lot of us, if we've been through trauma, we can sense what's going on in the room. And so whether that makes us great for law enforcement, because now you're hyper vigilant, you're going to be walking around.
I can't go nowhere. Like
picking up everything.
Even
everywhere.
Restaurants, Sadie will get irritated because I have to sit in like a booth. I will not go to a restaurant if they don't have booths. And
Door
I have to,
in front of you.
I have to sit right there. And mine, obviously I carry outside of work or anything that I did. So it's like, why am I still like this? But, I'm going to be honest. And this is where I agree with you a lot, which is shocking because like
you didn't expect to.
not saying no. I had high hopes. I was nervous, and I'm not anyone that knows me. I do not get nervous. I do not have. I promise you, I don't get nervous in public speaking events or anything like that. I do not get nervous. But for some odd reason, when your husband said this, I got nervous. I'm like, man, what the hell am I getting myself into? So I look up to you highly for sure.
Being vulnerable,
I'm being vulnerable.
Which means to wound,
I thought I was being vulnerable up until now in my life, but ain't no way. But I'm gonna be honest. I learned a lot from my last relationship of what not to be, what's accepted, what's not, and should and shouldn't. Yeah, I learned a lot, and I'm open with everything that I talk about. It's not that I don't want the world to know, or I want the world to know. One, I don't care about people's feedback because how I see it is, one, I will tell you all my negatives and walk out that room more happier than anything because one, I'll tell you everything negative about me. And then I'll walk out happy because I'm still here. I'm still living. God is still providing. God is still in my life. My family's healthy. Yep. What I learned from my last relationship specifically is how not to be used as a pawn.
Ooh, okay.
I was used as a pawn a lot, not only for that particular benefit, but for our kids' benefit. And I'm going to say this. And this is where we might have a difference.
That's okay.
And this is where we might have a specific racial difference. Okay. I promise you, I still respect you, but
okay.
It's hard as hell for a black man to face a white woman in court.
Oh, I agree with you.
I'm gonna be okay. Good, thank you.
Oh my goodness, yes, I agree.
Me as an individual going up against a woman in court, specifically, I only can speak from my experience. I'm gonna say white, Caucasian, whatever. It's almost impossible for me to win. And mind you, I've always been there. I've always been involved. There has been no, it's a lot of he said, she said stuff that goes back and forth.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want you to have him on the week because I want to have him on the week. It was never like, okay, you didn't do this. You're not doing this. I want you involved in a life. Let me go to court. It was because that particular person saw me happy in another individual. Because we were in my last relationship, we were together for 7 years.
Oh, wow.
And once I moved on, we obviously communicated that I was going to be moving across state. Mind you, Iowa is 22 hours away. So I had to put all my faith into, it wasn't just something that we just planned either. It was like almost a year making of, us moving, me and Sadie.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, we're about to move across state. So I want to spend all the time with the kids. Oh, well, you still can only get them this day. Even mind you, our oldest is they're older, to where I was like, what, whatever. So once she heard that we were moving, she went straight to court. The court gave her sole legal custody. I'm like, oof. For what? I never was not there. So now it's like my relationship taught me a lot of how not to be a pawn, how not to be vulnerable for that particular person, because there's a positive and a negative. Like right now I can be vulnerable for sure, but
yes, it's crazy. Yeah. And there's different kinds of, but yeah, I do agree with you. Like I said, cookout example, right?
Yeah.
If you
don't
were
have that in her head.
No, I'm serious, right? Because if you were to call the cops on me, the cops are going to show up and be like, ma'am, I mean, well, I don't want to, you have the law enforcement experience here too, right? But it's going to be like, ma'am, what happened? I'll be like,
That's
I
true.
don't know. I just came. I just wanted to hang out. I could call Karen style, right? Somebody could get hurt. So no, and the legal system,
it sucks.
Oh no, we agree, and especially for black men. No, 100% agree there. I don't know the whole details, but that is facts. So the thing about vulnerability too is what I had to learn is, and I think it was because, which I haven't shared a whole lot about my background, right? But
let's get into that.
You can ask me a lot of questions, right? So, oh goodness, what's important, right? So I joke all the time, right? It was the stereotypical, we were in a trailer house and, it was me and my sister. So we didn't have like a lot. Dad's drug abuse started way before I was even born. Yeah. I think the major coke charge though was, I think I was just around the time I was born, right? So then we moved from Odessa, Texas to rural New Mexico. And then I always knew, right, that there was something going on, but Dad's drug abuse continued. And then, Mom left. And so, Dad coming in and out, didn't really, know much. And then this is where it gets tricky. It's hard because when someone uses drugs, it's hard to know the line between what's mental health and what's substance use. But we think it was some schizophrenia, some certain things. And so, it was a little chaotic. It was a little chaotic, which again, same thing I'm so grateful for, because I think it started to make me very curious about, why people do what they do. Also how it affects families as well, how it affects couples. And so, it gets me to where I am now.
Yeah, that's good. Because now you're a huge role with a lot of like responsibilities. Yeah. And for me, if I was in your shoes, like, I don't know how I would not make their problems my problems.
It's hard not to, hard. But, and so back to that vulnerability, right? I think growing up, I at first just wanted to pretend that everything was fine, right? I just wanted to be like everybody else. My family doesn't have problems. We're good to go. But then I started learning how good it felt to talk about everything, which is good, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But I would almost say all the things. Yeah. So there's different types. There's still privacy. Even with vulnerability, there's still privacy. So I've kind of had to learn that too, is like, wait, and with, again, I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until grad school. And so now I also know some of it is just, I will talk and talk and talk.
That's how I am. No, that's how I am. And it's like hearing it coming from, like I said, a different point of view other than someone that I'm close with.
Yeah.
It is amazing. And like I said, I'm open 99% of the time. So hearing your story is amazing, and hearing your responses to things that I thought of myself, but obviously not out loud in a way, and coming and you saying similar things to as in what I was thinking, just only goes to show like everybody's supposed to be in your life for a reason. You know, and
absolutely.
things like that. Everybody comes around for a specific reason. And I had to learn, I kind of getting back to that sex therapy, not everybody that I came across was somebody that I was supposed to be with, or I was supposed to be
or supposed to share with, right?
Like
that's what's tough, is knowing that difference between, okay, I'm willing to share what's important, and maybe this person hasn't earned the right to know those things, or they're going to use them in a way that's not.
That's amazing, man. We gotta that's dope. I'm like I said, I'm still nervous, and we've been on an hour and 30, and I'm like, ain't no way. But I tell people all the time, you got to be different. You got to be accepted, you know, have that acceptance to trying new things, you know, trying to communicate more, especially in the men world. I want a lot of men to learn how to communicate more, be vulnerable to the right people, right time and place, but be open to communicate and talk about a lot of things that could be aspects or, you know, things to your healing. Because a lot of times, like I said, I was always just locking things in. You know, I was always just bottling them up, going to school, letting it out, getting in a fight, whatever. Cool. So I think that would be my advice to a lot of men. I would say is learn how to communicate, learn how to open up and talk about your problems with the right people, because not everybody needs to.
Like a therapist. No, I'm kidding.
No, honestly, no, I'm going to be honest, like a therapist for real. Like, because not everybody know how to communicate how I do or you do for sure. So if you need to get to that point, I would say go see a therapist for sure.
And it's not for everybody. To be fair, just have some type of support. Really, group is where I wish everyone could be. It's just, you know, whether it's men's groups, group is amazing. Just for those who haven't ever been to therapy, an ideal experience, in my opinion, everybody needs something different, is, you know, if you were coming into therapy, I don't pretend to know your experience. You are the expert on you. What I'm going to do is just provide what you need. For some people, they are like, hey, I keep doing the same thing and I don't really understand why or where this comes from. For some people, it's not that at all. It's just, I need somewhere, because I'm so stressed, because I've got a lot on my mind. I need to be able to share with somebody that isn't looking to me as their protector, their provider, their whatever. I need to just be able to say it and someone not think of me any different. Or sometimes it is advice, right? Like, I don't understand, you know, this person is treating me this way and what can I do different? And so that's what I want people to know, is I'm hoping it's different than it was even when we were younger, right? Where now it's, you have this space for it to be whatever it needs to be. And I'll provide you information, but you get to decide what sticks. And I tell my clients anyway, not every therapist is cool with this, but disagree with me, please. Like, if I use a word that does not match with what you think, you need to tell me. And I mean, if I'm poking around and I'm like, and you're like, no. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, of course I'll be like, hey, you know,
like, come on now.
I think this is about your dad, you know, but to feel comfortable in therapy. And what's unfortunate too, is I've even been to people where they're like, oh, you know, this person's amazing. And they were amazing. They're an amazing therapist. With my personality, with what I've got going on, it just wasn't a good fit. And I think that's the unfortunate part, is even for people that are willing to and want to, it is hard to find the right fit. Or it's an important thing to know who you're talking to, and who you feel safe with and who you feel comfortable with too, right? And again, I don't want us going through the world and life thinking about it this way, but just know, would you feel comfortable talking to someone of a certain gender? Would you feel more comfortable talking to someone that looks more like you? Like, that's not wrong. Right. Access is the hard part, you know.
That's dope that you said that, because I had to learn that. I had to learn how to not only adapt and communicate with someone that doesn't look like me or act like I do, never been in my same shoes. I had to learn how to adapt to that. And I would say that's amazing. That's the goal for sure. I guess as a therapist, professional aspect, what's your next steps? What's your overall goal? Because you're in the position that you wanted. What's your next goal?
No, honestly, I think some of this opportunity, even though my husband was like, would you ever consider it, is I think, speaking of access, I have a lot of like guilt because I am in private practice, because of icky systems of insurance. I don't accept insurance. So I do offer sliding scale, but access to information is huge for me. I want people to be able to access therapy because truly I love what I do, but I'm part of a system that is hard to access, and it's hard. And then for those of us that are full, we want to work with so many people. And so I think that is next steps. So I'm going to start what's called supervising. So in my field, a big part of it is, yes, you go to school. Also, I'm going to advocate for the profession just a little bit here, right? So, you know, not everybody is good. Just like in every profession, there's going to be horrible therapists that actually do a lot of damage. For those of us that are really trying our best, you go to school for all those years, right? Then you do what's called in Nevada, every state's different. Then you have to be an intern. Then you have to show, like, by the time we get to be in front of you, we've tried to do a lot of work. So, but part of that too is my next step now is I want to be what's called a supervisor. So now students and interns coming into the field, I can help mentor them and sort of guide them as part of their work because we do not want anyone doing harm. If you are starting to work with someone when you're new, you're supervised by someone. So you go to talk to someone and say, hey, I tried this and it just didn't land. Or like, hey, this person's experiencing this and I've never worked with that. And you have this mentor.
That's dope. Yeah.
That's done that
Having
before.
that, I think, is a huge plus because there's not a lot of, like, I would say Boys and Girls Club or Big Brother, Big Sister Me programs around anymore. Not as much. And that's kind of my next goal is I want to go into schools and motivational speak to, I don't need to get paid. I'm not doing this to get paid. I want to just go out there and freely speak to schools. I found out the schools here are not the greatest, but they suck at responding too. So I physically have to call.
We're kind of the worst in the country in mental health and education. Woo. We're working on it. We're trying. But what you're talking about too is community. So, I mean, if I'm big dreaming, I would want to create spaces for community because I can if I'm working with you, we can talk about all these things. You want to be connected with other people, but the way, especially Vegas, is set up, you know, it's not walkable. We're all here to just work and go home. You know, if you do meet somebody, they're probably a tourist. And so I want people to be able to access community. People need that in their life, especially those who, even if they have family support, it's not here. To really, really heal a lot of what's happening in our country. And we have to all be better connected to one another. And it's through community.
One step at a time for sure. And I think what you're doing is great. You definitely opened my eyes more specifically for you. I wouldn't say the whole world for therapists. I still have my same thoughts.
Oh, yes. And you should
for you specifically, you can't change the world. You only can change the environment that you're in, and you can hope that just has a trickling effect. That's amazing. But what I would want to say, if you had one last advice to give to the community, the audience in general, what would it be? Men or women? Doesn't matter.
Ooh. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's not. It's just check in with yourself.
That's deep, though.
You know, I mean, I don't care what you're doing. It's more of just like, all right, wait, how am I feeling right now? The stereotypical therapist response is, where do you feel that in your body?
Like, where is that?
I guess it is that, right? Of just, if all of us were more mindful, I mean, I'm going to sound like, you know, such a little naive little nerd here, but truly, when you are driving, when you wake up in the morning, when you're about to go talk to your kids about something, when you have to walk into work, take a deep breath. How are you actually doing?
Really tune in with yourself.
No, and then just see.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And just see.
Because a lot of times I see a lot of people, they're just complaining about a lot of things. I don't, whatever it could be, it's a lot of things to where I feel like if you tune in with yourself, you dial in, you really focus and get your mindset right, you can achieve anything for sure. You really just have to be in tune with yourself. My advice would be to any one of you guys, men, women, whatever, would just continue to accept your flaws, but learn how to speak on it. Learn how to accept them. And by accepting them, I just mean speak on them with to someone about them to where it's going to make a difference for sure. It's going to relieve something that you may not know is there. So really speak up about a lot of the negative things or things that might be bothering you. So that would be my advice for anyone. Like I said, it's not easy. It's hard. A lot of times I get asked like, how am I comfortable of sitting around talking about things? And I'm like, I'm gonna be honest, bro. I just started talking one time and I never looked back.
And you probably got connection from it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I definitely.
That's what I tell everyone all the time. It's the scariest thing, and then yet someone will feel more connected to you and safer with you.
It's amazing because like I wouldn't expect it, but I love the feeling of being able to, because I know what I can and cannot say to people or shouldn't just by off the right second that I meet them.
Yes.
And so I'm like, no, I'm cool. And right as soon as I met you, I'm like, oh, dog, I'm even more nervous than now. I'm like, ain't no way. I'm like, it literally blows my mind because I promise you, like any one of my relatives will tell you, like, hell no. Like I love people, but I promise you, like, it's just hard for me to open up to everybody. I open up, don't get me wrong, but to everybody. And then obviously it being our first time just meeting, I'm like, man, no. But here I am.
Well, you have to welcome me back and I'll just try to make you cry.
No,
and then
you do that. Oh my God. And I'll cry. I promise you. So no, don't do that. Don't do that.
No, I'm kidding.
But other than that, like I do want to say thank you for coming on the podcast.
Of course, no. Thank you for having
It's been amazing. It's been wonderful to have you on the podcast, seeing it from a therapist point of view, and then your profession is not an easy profession for sure. So I want to give gratitude to that because you mentally go through a lot just like anybody else.
Yeah.
So, that's amazing.
But I learn from my clients too.
You definitely learn from your clients for sure. So you have a good spirit to where you are truly there to help and not just tell people to get on Ritalin. So
absolutely. Unless you need it like me. But if
unless y'all need it, because some of y'all may need it. But I do want to say thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I want to say thank you to your husband because he's the one that introduced us and kind of brought you. Kind of not forced her, but he made you come.
He does all of my authentic marketing, I guess.
which is amazing because he's in real estate. If you guys don't know, but he does a lot of that, so he's very well outspoken in general. So he was like, "Man, I think so." I want to say thank you to him too as well. I'll see him again Monday, so I'm not worried about it. But other than that, guys, I do want to say thank you guys for joining the podcast. Thank you guys for coming on, visiting. If you guys have any comments, any concerns, just comment down in the video for sure. You guys leave the comments. I love the feedback. And then do you have like a professional page to where I can post?
I do. So it's really just my website right now, which is pharaohfamilytherapy.com.
Y'all heard
is the
it.
main place. Yeah.
Send it to me.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure send it to me so I can put it in the description.
Sure.
But other than that, that's it, man. Like I said, thank you guys for tuning in, and we out, man. Have a good rest of y'all day. Peace.
Thanks.